Hello everyone. I want to summarize the Ampere and Big Navi discussions for you and then share my thoughts. Okay, so to get started, the biggest thing that you need to know right now is the charts, slides, or whatever you wish to call them for Ampere were cherry-picked. To make it worse, the numbers were inflated. It's a marketing tactic by NVIDIA, and there's a reason they're doing this. It's because NVIDIA has brand loyalty, whereas AMD video cards don't. NVIDIA is relying on throwing big numbers at people and using that brand loyalty to get people to be early adopters of the Ampere line. That's what NVIDIA is trying to do. Whether or not that's because of just dirty marketing tactics, a combination of that plus, them being worried about Big Navi, who knows? Bottom line is they're being scummy because they can. They have that brand loyalty in and everything else. So a lot of people are saying wait until the specs come out for not just Ampere's line, but also Big Navi, because we need to see what is truly going on, which is hard to do right now based on just numbers alone. We need real performance and benchmark tests to determine where did NVIDIA inflate everything. Another thing that you need to keep in mind, and this will tie into both what I was just mentioning earlier as well as the Navi discussion, is that the supply for Amperes is going to be really low. Because the supply is going to be really low, there's not going to be a good chance for people to get Ampere this year. And for that matter, until next year more than likely. Because of that, it may not be possible for everyone to get an Ampere in a reasonable amount of time. One thing that I'm going to expect happen, and I could be wrong, is that due to the low supply, the prices are going to inflate hard. It's what happened in prior NVIDIA launches, where there was such a low supply to the demand that they inflated the prices to ludicrous levels. That's happened with that cryptocurrency thing a few years ago. It hit AMD too, but NVIDIA took, I think, the hardest hit. So that's one example, and then of course later generations video cards also had that issue. So let's just say even if you could get a hold of it, well, it's probably going to be more expensive than it was intended. So I would say those are the two things to really focus on right now when it comes to Ampere. Big Navi though, let's go to that because this is going to be an interesting discussion. So as I mentioned earlier, NVIDIA has brand loyalty, AMD does not. Historically, AMD has had issues with their video cards on the driver side more than anything else. A lot of video cards they've made actually happen to be really good for their price. It's just they didn't have the driver there to make it hassle-free and stable. To compound that, there have been games that aren't optimized, Call of Duty Modern Warfare being one of them. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is still unoptimized even after all this time. Because of that, people are suffering on performance and in some cases may not be able to play the game at all. I'm one of those people. I still can't play Call of Duty because it doesn't play nice with my computer. It's not my computer's fault, it's the game's fault. And that's just something you have to deal with. So, unfortunately, because most people are quick to judge rather than actually read for themselves, they are blaming everything on the drivers. However, it's not always the driver's fault, as I was just pointing out. So you have a combination of poor brand loyalty and people not educating themselves, which you have to expect, because I'm not saying everybody, but a good portion of the world is lazy. They prefer everybody to do the work for them when it comes to computers. The second you start talking about one video card or the other, someone somewhere is going to shut down, saying this is too much information, I don't want to learn. That's just the way the world works. So while AMD has certainly done well and they've fixed issues with their video cards over the years, they're they're learning from their mistakes. People aren't going to hear that. They're just gonna be like, whatever. Moving on. As part of AMD's history, their strategy has, for the most part, been to sell you a video card with good performance at a reasonable price, and also on top of that, with a lot of gigs. That's just the way AMD has always been, and I think that's going to continue even into Big Navi, based on what I've been listening to and reading. A lot of people are saying right now that the Big Navi is not going to be 16 gigs or 24 gigs. It's more or less going to be 8. We'll see if that's the case. But either way, if they can offer an 8GB video card, that's, let's just say, within 10% performance range of a 20 Ti, that has a good price, then they've already won on that front because it's price to value. They can further win by ensuring supply. If AMD can outsupply NVIDIA this year, then that's another win for them. Unfortunately, that all rides on them being able to actually get their drivers in place. Because if they have another mistake like they did in prior years with their video card drivers, then it's going to flop on them. So that's kind of where things are at between Ampere and Big Navi. Now, let's go and talk about my thoughts on this subject. I am a PC builder that tries to remain neutral. I won't fanboy one brand over another. I will always review reviews and do my best to give the best advice and PC part list to a person that asks for my help. Due to that, I will switch components every year if need be. To me, at the end of the day, it just matters what the review is saying and what the customer needs. That's all I care about. I will add my own opinion in it from time to time, but only as like a final call type of thing. Because let's just say I've given my clients, 3 options, and they're telling me to pick one because they're really unsure. Then I will throw an opinion and say, well, this has been my experience, or this is what I've seen in reviews or something. That's the only time an opinion comes into play. But otherwise, I stick to the facts and I do what's asked. That's it. So with that in mind, I have no problem doing Ampere or Big Navi in a build. I have 0 issues, just as long as the review says it's fine. That's all I care about. As for me personally, I will more than likely go with AMD just because, I don't have a lot of money. And if I can get something better for lower cost, then that's what I'm going to do because, that's just this way the situation is. I can't change that. Let's go and talk about some other things, though, because I think that there's some other things that need to be said about this year. And I've already had some of that up on the screen, but we've covered the patience thing, and I will link this so you can read it if you want to. But I think we do want to talk about one other important topic that kind of relates to both video cards, and that's encoding. One thing that NVIDIA has an advantage on when it comes to AMD is encoding. NVENC is an extremely efficient encoding method for streamers. It works really well if you do it right. The problem is that most people don't know how to do it right. You see, here's the funny thing with NVENC. NVENC is a separate chip on the video card, at least on the 2000 series. I don't know about 3000 series yet, but on 2000 series, it's a separate chip. That chip is specifically designed for 1080p. Sure, you can do 1440p or lower, but it was designed for 1080p. Meaning, if you set yourself to 1080p, NVENC will perform at its best. But if you do things that the chip was not built for, such as psycho tuning and some other stuff, then it will draw resources from the video card. See, that's what most people don't get about it. I know this because I have actually talked to NVIDIA staff before, and I know exactly how to do NVENC with an NVIDIA video card because I have talked to them. I've asked them questions. But most people, again, are not knowledgeable in the subject because there's not enough people, wanting to learn that stuff. So the reason I'm bringing up NVENC and the issues with it is because I think AMD can do something similar. I think AMD can improve in one area, and that is encoding. And I think that they actually have the stuff in place to do better encoding than NVIDIA. Something that actually doesn't require you to know the finer details like that. Because if a PC builder has to go to the video card staff just to ask questions, then that is a problem. Because then that means you haven't clearly laid out what it can and can't do. So AMD could potentially swoop in on that because they're already winning against Intel in terms of encoding on the CPU end. Problem is, X264 is a very old encoding method, and it's not really going to be that great in certain applications. For OBS Studio, it's perfectly fine, but for stuff like Rainway or some of the other software out there that do use encoding, they don't have X264 optimized. So you're never going to be able to utilize that amazing ability of Ryzen processors for that application. And then there's one other factor too to this. Let's just say it's you have optimization on both encoding. Well, now it becomes a matter of the game, because games like Call of Duty, which are not optimized, they're going to eat more resources than normal. For that reason, a lot of the streamers out there do stream to X264 because the video card is already maxed out trying to play Call of Duty. So it's not going to have the spare resources to encode as well as it should. Therefore, it's easier to go to CPU encoding because of the fact that it has room to spare. Games these days, generally speaking, don't go past 4 cores. There are some exceptions to that rule, just like any rule, but for the most part, they don't go past 4 cores. So as long as you have 8 cores, in addition to, let's just say, an RTX 2070, then you have the flexibility to flip between NVENC or X264 anytime that a game presents a problem on one end or the other. So where AMD can improve with this, now that you kind of understand where things are going, is to either make a better X264 encoder or create a hybrid encoder. In the past recordings, I did say that AMD should be doing an improved X264 encoder because of their CPUs being so dominant in that area. But that was before I saw the patent for AMD's version of ray tracing. Their version of ray tracing, as I understand from the patent, is a hybrid. It's using both hardware and software. I think they can do the same thing to an encoder. AMD has made very good APUs, which are CPUs with integrated graphics that are very, very large. That's what I've had on the screen this whole time. This is the AMD Ryzen 7 4750G. It's the upcoming flagship APU from AMD. Now, it's been out for the OEM market, so your brands like Dell and stuff. It's been out for them, but not for the people that build like me. So it's not going to be out on Newegg or the other things, but it will be available at Dell and some of the other places. Well, Dell or equivalent, I should say. I don't know if it's actually out for Dell, but you get what I mean. It's the brand names, OEMs. So here's the interesting thing, is they've mastered APUs at this point. They could probably do a hybrid encoding that uses both CPU and GPU. That would allow it to be able to encode 2 different things at the same time. Well, 2 different encoding methods, I should say. I think that would probably be a way of handling it. If they don't want to do an X264 improvement, then they can certainly do a hybrid in which they're using video and CPU. Given that they have APUs, it's perfectly feasible to do it with the way the market is right now. Maybe something more complicated like putting a Ryzen CPU, or at least part of a Ryzen CPU in their video cards, will likely require an architectural redesign, and that's just not going to happen. But on an APU, it might happen. So, short version, AMD could do encoding, and that would certainly give them a bonus or a leg up. While we're talking about this APU, though, I do want to finish the recording by discussing this very interesting topic, and this is something that we're going to have to wait and see what happens. The way that the APUs are designed that are coming out, they're designed in such a way that everything is connected together. They're not in chiplet design, they're together. So AMD is claiming, and of course some other people, that because everything is together on these APUs, they're able to process things like cache a lot quicker than their chiplet counterparts. So in this case, it would be 3700X. So if that's true, and that the APUs are able to process things a lot better than a 3700X, that's a huge deal. Because some games don't actually require the CPU cache. So you don't need a monster amount of cache, which is what the 3700X is, in some games. If that's the case, then I'm now wondering if actually the secret to AMD's processors for gaming is actually going to be their APUs. And maybe that's something they can learn from. Maybe in the future they will do that. They will make CPU specific to gaming and CPU specific to workloads. But either way, we need to see where the cache business goes and where all this goes in terms of their performance. Because right now, there's really only benchmarks for the 47G. I haven't seen benchmarks for the other APUs yet, but it should be very interesting if everything holds true with what I was saying with the cache and the other parts of the APU. So yeah, we'll see where things go. But that's all I have to really say on this. Thanks for listening.